Hello, everybody. We're going to give it a minute to let everybody log in. We have a number of participants today, so we just want to give everybody a second to hop on. We are thrilled to see this high of numbers for our topic. That's a sign to us that we have families that are interested in learning more about this. So this is exciting to us because we love talking about it. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Megan Muty. I'm with Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center, and my partner in crime is Abby Marr. She's the transition facilitator at our program. But before we even jump into this, which is going to be a focus on key questions during secondary transition, we want to turn it over to our partners at the ARC of Illinois Family Advocate Program so they can introduce themselves, because you're going to be seeing a lot more of them as the series continues. So I'm going to turn it over to Annie Bruno.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks for having us here. We are thrilled to see so much participation in this really awesome new Lunch and Learn series. Maybe if it's highly sought after, we'll have to repeat it, I guess. But we really appreciate the invitation by Family Matters to work on this together. My name is Annie Bruno. I'm a Central and Southern Family Advocate here at the ARC of Illinois in the Family Advocate Program. I have with me here Miss Jaren Olson. Jaren, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you again to Family Matters for the partnership. We're going to let you guys take it away, but we look forward to presenting next week. Thanks.
Thank you. So we've had a long-standing partnership with the ARC, and it's worked really well because some of our families cross over in terms of who we're working with in late transition, and as they're transitioning to community adult supports, we're working with similar families. So we really appreciate this partnership. It works well for us. So before I share my screen, Abby and I are going to bounce back and forth. You'll get to know both of us during this presentation, but it would be great to know who we have. So Abby, see, has already put the slides. You already have access to the slides in the chat. Please feel free to use the chat. Please put where you're from, if you're a parent or guardian, if you're a school professional. We'd love to know sort of what your role and what your interest is here today. And then we'll go ahead and get started by sharing our screen. If you have questions, it's easier for us at the end to use the Q&A box. So when you're using the chat, feel free to interact with each other, put your information about who you are. But when you have a specific question about something Abby and I are talking about, if you could put it in the Q&A box, it's a little bit easier for us to keep track at the end of the presentation. And we will get to as many of those as we can. These are being recorded, so they'll be made available to everybody who's registered. So you don't have to worry if you have to hop off early, you'll have access to all of the information. We're getting there. Okay, Abby, you want to start?
Nope, you're going to start. That's how I had it mapped out. So
Oh.
you get to introduce yourself that way. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Abby put pictures in our slides, so you're all going to see. So Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center, it's the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Illinois. So every state has at least one. It's federally funded through the Office of Special Education Programs. And our focus is on ensuring that families have the information and support to navigate to the special education system primarily. Though we work with families who have individuals 0 to 26 who have disabilities. So we often do work with families who are late in secondary transition or who are newly diagnosed and needing support and system navigation information very early in the system. So you will see us working with families of kiddos of all age ranges. So we do one-to-one support. So if you want to make an appointment with one of our educational support coaches for support in, for example, reviewing your IEP document, you can do that online. We do a lot of workshops and training sessions. Right now, we're in the midst of about 40 that we have scheduled over the course of 4 months. We develop lots of resources. Abby has a great deal of resources on secondary transition she can make available to you. We do transition planning guidance specifically with Charting the Life course, and we'll touch base on that a little bit today. And we try to connect families to other families. There is our website if you want to jump on and see what's going on at the center. There's lots of information there. This is me. And as we're going to talk today about transition, a good focus of that's going to be building plans that are unique and interesting and focused on the hopes and goals and dreams of a specific individual. And to do that, you need to know a lot about that individual. So it's important that you know a little bit about me as we're talking. So I live in Peoria, Illinois. I am the parent to a 26-year-old daughter who has autism and intellectual disabilities. I've been with Family Matters about 3 years, and prior to that was with the ARC of Illinois Family Support Program with Annie and Jaron, who are here today. I love to fish, which surprises me too, but I do love to fish, and I am a huge animal lover. We do a lot of fostering, so this is me with some of our very first foster puppies, and we're waiting for another pair of foster puppies to come in the next few days. So it's something we love to do. And now you have just a little glimpse into who I am. And Abby, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, my name is Abby Mars, and I'm a transition facilitator and Charting the Life course ambassador here at Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center. I have been with Family Matters almost 6 years. I am a mom to 4 students. 2 of them, I guess, aren't students anymore. If they're, at least one of them is, and he's too old now. But my oldest son does have high support needs, autism, and intellectual disability, as well as catastrophic epilepsy. So we're a busy household. I'm a scout leader, Special Olympics coach, again, Charting Life course ambassador, something I'm very proud of, and soon to be grandma. So that is me. I'm getting comfortable with that term. Let's put it that way. I've bounced around a little bit with all the fun new age grandma terms, and I haven't landed quite on one yet. So, but yeah, I'm very passionate about secondary transition, and I do hold a bachelor's degree in human services with a career focus on transitioning students to high school support. To adult supports. Next slide, please. All right. So what is secondary transition? It's a good question, right? We use this phrase a lot with our students, and we don't take the time to explain to them what is secondary transition. It sounds complex. It sounds like something I don't want to do, but in the heart of the word transition, it means moving from one thing to the other. And that's what we're doing for our students. Now, secondary transition is protected for our students with disabilities under IDEA. So if our students have an IEP plan, they have to have a transition plan. We do really great in the state of Illinois, and we start to develop those plans at age 14 and a half. The reason why we do a little bit better than the national approach is because we know those key years in high school are crucial to develop these skills. We want our students to have every advantage possible to be able to get into college or have work experience or make and build community partnerships. So in Illinois, we start at age 14 and a half to develop those secondary transition plans, which are essentially plans for the future for our students. So the transition plans are supposed to identify goals, and those goals are set up to support our students for life after high school. I think I can see from the chat, all of us are on the same page with what in the heck a transition plan is and why we need one. So next slide, please. So when does transition planning start? Well, I don't know about you guys, but my kids' transition planning started the first day I dropped him off at preschool. Okay, so we start to learn about our student as they go to school, and we start to gather information and gather data. Now, once our children become eligible for IEP services, we have more records of that data. We've identified that they aren't at peer level on some area, and we collect data, and we really try accommodations and goals and supports to have our students succeed. But as they go into high school, as they are getting to that 14 and a half point, we start to develop an official transition plan. So we start at age 14 and a half to do that. And we do that in lots of different ways. I'm sure we're all familiar with that term, assessments, right? We do a lot of assessments. We do a lot of observations. We talk to our students a lot, and we ask them what they want for the future. And we ask them what they want for the future in 3 specific areas: the areas of employment, the areas in secondary learning, and the areas of how independent they want to be to live as an adult. So you can see here, this is kind of broken down. Age 14 and a half, we officially start that transition plan per Illinois code. Age 16 is where federal code starts, but we've already got a jump start. So at age 17, we start preparing our student to understand their rights, and that at age 18, those rights become within their power. At age 18, we reinforce that and let them know, hey, this is what's going on. And we really look at, are they going to need more help than that? Should our students sign a delegation of rights and our caregivers still be involved? Do my students need the support of guardianship or some other type of supportive decision making? And then in Illinois at age 22 is when those entitlement or educational services stop. Next slides, please. And I can't remember whose slide it is. I'm sorry. I just keep going.
You're fine. Actually,
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead as we get started, and I want to launch a quick poll, and I want to ask you from a student perspective and from a family perspective, knowing we have all different types of folks on the call today, how involved thus far do you feel involved in the transition process? So I'm going to go ahead and open that up before we switch slides. On a scale
Yes,
of 1 to 10 with,
Go ahead.
oh, you see it, Abby?
Yep.
Okay.
I can see
On a
it.
scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all and 10 being very much involved, how involved in the overall transition have you felt as a parent guardian? And then how student-led has the process been? And by student-led, we're talking about student-led IEPs and student-driven employment opportunities, and that the entire plan is driven by student interests and experiences.
And I try really hard during the presentation to not look at the chat because I have ADHD and I get really off topic. But I have noticed somebody put something in here I wanted to address, and it says, will this be relevant to me if my child is too medically complex to work or live independently? 1000% yes. Okay. Your student is still going to have life after they leave high school. Okay. They're still going to do things and be part of their community. So 100% yes. Transition plans are customizable, just like an IEP. Work doesn't look the same for everybody. It doesn't look the same for you or me. I work from home. You might work in an office building. Where I live looks different from you to me. So yes, transition plans are universal for every student.
So we find this one oh, sorry, Abby, I'm jumping
I
over
was
top.
just going to read the poll if that's what you wanted me to do. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I just wanted to share the results. And so
Okay,
this
that's
tells
what I was
us
doing too. Go for it.
This said 32 out of 78 answers, and that my guess is that's related to folks who are parenting right now, but that's just a guess. And so you can see how involved does the parent or guardian feel in the process. It's very spread out. You can see all across the board, all kinds of different experiences with that. And that would align with what Abby and I see every day when we talk to families and they call the center. How student-led has the process been? So you can see a little bit different. These numbers are slightly lower in how student-led the process has been, which again, that's what we're here to talk about. We know that student-led transition plans lead to better outcomes, and that we know that every student can be involved in their transition planning in one way or the other. It looks very different depending on their needs and supports. Okay. So on that note, Abby spends most of her time centering the voice of students. That's how her entire role is built. And she's in school districts and talking to families and talking to educators about how that can look different. So what we want to encourage you to do is, before you do any other planning on what your transition services are going to look like, you start thinking about what it's going to look like to have the student at the center of the table. And I will say this, if that has not been how it's been for you all through developing IEPs and 504s across this person's lifespan, that's going to be a significant shift for the school team and for you as a family. And getting some support around that and prepping appropriately so that it doesn't feel intimidating and overwhelming and you feel like it's meaningful can make it go much more smoothly. That's where Abby comes in. So she can help you with some of that. We know that it matters because it increases motivation. We don't want, me too, like as a 52-year-old woman, I don't want to participate in plans that I had no voice in building, right? That doesn't drive my interest level. Well, it's the same for students. If they have no voice in what it's going to look like, their motivation to participate in that is low. It builds self-advocacy skills, determination, creates ownership of what those goals and outcomes are. If I had a voice in what it looks like, I'm far more committed to pushing through, even when it gets difficult. And we know that it leads to more successful outcomes. And you've heard it over and over again, I'm sure. Nothing about me without me. Well, that definitely starts early on in the IEP process and follows through the transition process. And we would encourage you to always have that in the back of your mind when you're evaluating how student-led and student-centered your processes are. So you'll hear us talk a lot today about the Charting the Life Course framework. We'll tell you we have a discussion group once a month if you're interested in this, to talk about the tools and how they can be used for students as they're moving through both early childhood into middle school, high school, and then transitioning into the community. But though Charting the Life Course is focused on building more robust conversations and plans so that we move away from like eligibility based services into more services that we're seeking out or even building based on the needs and interests of a particular person. So it's very easy to sort of look at a menu of options in Illinois when somebody leaves the school system and say, well, these are the options I have. Those are the options that you might have eligibility for, but those are not all the options you have. You have lots of options. And we want to consider different ways to meet the needs of individuals who might not fit in or just fit in to those eligibility-based systems. Those definitely have a place, but they don't build a life. And so we'll talk about Charting the Life Course and those tools and how they can build conversations that make things a little more meaningful for students and build transition plans that really actually align with goals and dreams, not just services. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so let's get into the whole title of the presentation, right? Some essential questions to ask. So, especially let's talk about assessments. So assessments is a word that our students might not be super familiar with while the instructor or the teacher, this transition specialist is talking to them about assessments, right? They feel like it's another test. Federal and state laws require these assessments in lots of different areas, lots of different districts. They're not district specific assessments, use different types, but there's both a formal and informal assessment and things that we do every single day to gather data about our students. So it's important to ensure these assessments truly capture the students' full abilities and dreams beyond just the standardized test. So if we use the same assessment for everybody, we're not going to get correct data for every student, right? So maybe the student that I'm serving is more focused on how independent they can live, whereas my student next to me is really focused on going to college and getting full potential at college. So all three goals are going to be addressed in the student's transition plan, but our students should lead this and the focus should be where they want to go. So assessment should include a variety of different tools like interest inventories, career surveys, situational evaluations, and community-based assessments. The assessment results must directly inform the measurable post-secondary goals and transition services that are outlined in the student's IEP. So it's important that when these assessments are shared with you, the parent and the student, that we ask very, very parent-friendly questions and say, okay, you did this assessment. You told me that you sat down with him and read some questions off a page, and this is the data that you got. What will this support? What does this help? So again, it's important that we understand that federal and Illinois laws both state that these assessments have to be done, but there's formal and informal assessments. So they don't just have to be paper assessments. They can be observing your student when they're playing a sport in PE and seeing if they have interest in that. That can lead to some type of independent living goal about healthcare and keeping your body strong. Same way, if you've noticed your student really enjoys going to home ec or foods class, that could potentially lead into a career or at least more supports in independent living. So we really are assessing our students every single day, whether we're doing it with a piece of paper or just with our eyeballs. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about some essential questions for post-secondary goals. Okay, so it's important, as always, that we make sure that these goals are SMART. Okay, we don't want to use vague statements like we'll explore employment options or plans to graduate this year. Those are super great things to have plans for, and they're in language that our students can understand, but they're a little too vague. Okay, so we want to make sure that those post-secondary goals that we outline in that transition plan should address all the areas. When it comes to education and training, remembering that education beyond high school looks different for everybody. Okay, whether you have a college degree, you have a trade school degree, or you just learned through real life examples and what life threw at you, we all learn after we leave high school. That doesn't stop when you are handed your diploma. We all work somehow after high school, okay? Whether that be in a traditional job setting, whether that be in a day program or a workshop, we all work after we leave high school, and we all live after we leave high school, no matter the level of support that we need when we live, whether it's independently or with, nobody does anything independently. I hate that term, but whether if it's with supports, without supports, in a group home setting, in an ICF facility, we all live after we leave high school. So we all need goals in this area, even if it's very clear what our students are going to have after high school, we still need a goal. So for example, even the position that I had, my son's transition plan was very vague, and it said, D plans to live in a group home near his mom. Okay, I that is what we plan to do, but let's get a little bit more complex about that. You know, D plans to live in a group home near his home and community, with the support of his family around him, and we need to increase these skills so we can find a group home that is acceptable. So it's important that these goals not be too vague for our students. So there's some good examples here. I hate reading a slide to you guys when you're obviously reading it when I'm talking, but it's important to understand, you know, that my goals are addressing all three areas that the transition plan has laid out, and that they are not too vague. They are specific for my student. Next slide, please.
So when we're talking about transition services, one of the things I want to encourage you to think about, and Abby hinted at this, the slide hinted at this, we get very focused in transition services on what life is going to look like between about 22 and 26. We focus our energy on that. That makes sense. That's the next step, right? I will encourage you to take a step back and don't think about 25. You can consider it, obviously, but think about 40. Because that is going to tell you whether you're building in consistent processes and supports and a network of support that's going to last over time, you know, that's going to offer fidelity to what that individual needs. And so it's much easier to build that to 25 than it is to build that to 40. But our folks grow and learn and change. How are we going to be assessing their needs appropriately over time? And how are we going to make sure that their voice is the center of everything we do when they're 40? Not just when they leave the high school setting. So that's something that we see. Sometimes we see that things are very robust, and then an individual leaves the school system, and then we revisit them later on, and we see that their life has been very stagnant from the time they left the school system, because we built a transition support team and a plan that's going to basically last till 25. But doesn't really go beyond that. We're very dependent on adult service providers to continue the growth of that, but we haven't really built a network of support beyond that. So one of the things you're always going to want to ask about, that I feel like we talk about all the time, is what is your network of support going to look like when there is nobody on the school team present within that network? That's really important. So some questions you want to ask is, what instructions and services are you going to use to help my child achieve their goals? So it should look different for everybody. If Abby were to get transition plans from a school for 10 students who were transitioning over the course of 3 years, she should see 10 very, very different, unique transition plans. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. There's a great variability there, but a strong transition plan is going to be unique to that individual. So we want to know what services and supports are going to be present for that student. How are services coordinated between agencies? Part of the reason Annie and Jaron present the way that they do is to ensure that families understand the system navigation piece of this. And there's no way around that. It's just incredibly overwhelming. And that's what actually drove me into working in the developmental disability system, is that I saw as a parent just how incredibly challenging it is to navigate these systems. So you really have to have something built into the transition plan that is going to make sure that families have all the information and support they need to navigate the system. That won't work as a DD provider or as a school if you don't have somebody on your team that understands the system. And so thinking about what that's going to look like and how we're going to make that information parent friendly, and you'll see it be parent friendly when Annie and Jaron present it, but that is a huge challenge, and it's something that frustrates families. And is there a clear action plan? Not just you're going to explore jobs in the community, as Abby mentioned, but you're going to explore jobs at these particular sites. Who is going to contact those sites? Who is going to set those up? Who is going to evaluate how effective the time at those sites was, and whether or not you want to pursue other things related to that? So if you have a student, for example, who's going to go out into the community and do observations or volunteering, let's say at 4 different auto shop sites, because that's a particular area of interest to them, who's going to go with them? Who's going to set it up? how are you going to know that it was effective and meaningful to the student and they weren't just standing there the entire time? So that all has to be built in the plan. You really want to avoid vagueness in your plans. You also want to talk a lot about courses of study, and this surprises families sometimes. So you heard Abby early in the presentation talk about college. We don't often hear transition plans dig into college. I actually just had a parent of a student with an IEP who visited the school counselor, and their course has always been that they would explore some college opportunities, whether it be a college program for individuals with disabilities or tapping into the support services that college has in their disability services office. And she was surprised when she met with a counselor that wasn't even on the table at all. That wasn't ever considered an option. But we're seeing incredible growth in college programs that are robust and really increase opportunity for students with all kinds of support needs. You'll hear us refer to Think College pretty frequently, and that's a great resource. But there are so many more options that families simply don't know about. And so if they're not guided to explore those options, those doors are shut before they even open. And that's an unfortunate situation. So you want to know, do the plans that my student have actually align with what we're putting in the transition IEP so that we're moving forward towards a certain thing. I remember at my daughter's IEP, there was lots of talk, or transition IEP, about her wanting to work at Subway. And I knew that she didn't want to work at Subway. Like, I knew that didn't align with her goals. But I think during sort of one or two transition discussions, she must have mentioned working at a restaurant. It's somehow sort of evolved into that, but we didn't really get past that as like a goal for the first couple of meetings, because that had just sort of gotten mentioned in passing, but we hadn't had really a robust planning session, both about interests and support needs and what's available in eligibility-based services to support her in community employment. What diploma or certificate is my child working toward? This needs to happen at that 14.5 meeting, really needs to happen actually at the 8th to 9th grade IEP. You need to know going in at your school if your student is going to be working towards a certificate of completion or an actual graduation with a high school diploma. And that's really important, because if you don't find that out until September of your junior year, you're really in a very difficult spot. And not having a diploma is a significant choice. It has significant outcomes. So make sure that you're voicing your concerns around that and building a plan with a team that aligns with what that student's needs are around that particular decision, certificate of completion or high school diploma. And then what kind of modifications and accommodations are going to be available to you during the transition process in particular, because that's going to take you out of the school environment, we hope, into the community environment to explore maybe DD providers, lots of employment options. You're exploring housing options. You might be volunteering. You're having internships. What kind of modifications and accommodations are going to follow the student so that those things can be successful and meaningful? That all should be written into the plan. Go ahead. Oops. Let me go back.
So let's talk about some essential questions. So in competitive integrative employment. So like I stated before, your job looks different from my job. My dad's job looks different from me. Not everybody's job is the same. So why do we, as professionals at school, give our kids 3 options to try to learn some skills for employment? Like, the majority of the schools I go into, they're so excited because, like, oh yes, we teach voc skills. We have kids in the greenhouse. We have kids in the cafeteria. We have kids working with the janitor. And I'm like, that's wonderful. But what about the kid that wants to do something different, right? We don't have those programs already set up and established. And it's not because they don't want to. It's just this has worked in the past, so they've just kept doing it. And we have to remember that schools sometimes are limited on what they can offer with staffing and things like that. So it's very important that you remember, for your students, it's individualized for them. I don't do well in a job that I go to that I don't like and I don't want to be there to do. My whole goal then is to get a different job that I like better, right? Our students are going to be the same way. If they are not interested in working in a cafeteria, if they're not interested in sweeping a floor, there's a good chance we're going to have behaviors related to that. They're not going to be successful. Like, they're might learn that, no, this isn't what I want to do, so I want to try something else. But we have to be clear and make sure that we're giving our students plenty of options. So I'm very passionate about this one. I don't like to put our kids in a box and say this is what you're capable of, because I think when we show them this is what we're going to show you and teach you how to do, they think that's all they're capable of doing. And there's nothing wrong with working in a cafeteria. There's nothing wrong with working in a greenhouse, and there's nothing wrong with being a janitor. But they deserve the chance to get to advocate for what they want to do when it comes to employment. Now, there's lots of different types of employment. Of course, there's paid employment, there's volunteer, there's lots of different things, workshops. We don't use the term workshop for the day programs. There's lots of different types of employment. So we're going to talk right now about competitive employment. So federal policy and research strongly supports competitive integrative employment as the preferred outcome for all students with disabilities. This means working in a typical workplace setting alongside people without disabilities and earning at least minimum wage. So we're going directly in the direction like we have in school of trying to give them a least restrictive environment when it comes to employment. So some key questions to ask is my child receiving work-based training at school? Like, are we trying some things out? Are we exploring different job options for jobs? Like I said before, we are only limiting to a certain pool. Is job coaching or support provided during these internships or times they're trying it? And are we connecting with the Division of Rehabilitation Services? So DRS, or most commonly referred to as DOORS, have we connected with them? I get a lot back from schools that will say, well, the special education or transition specialist will say, we contacted DOORS and they said they really don't get involved until my student's almost 18. Well, for a typical student, then they've lost 3 years of voc experience, right? So we have to push back and we have to say, oh no, we want to be trying to work now. So sometimes we don't ask the right questions to DRS and we get an answer that we just go with it because we think that's it, but we haven't asked the right questions. So make sure we're exploring all those options. And then again, does the IEP address traveling, training, and workplace and social skills in the workplace? That's big too. I'd like to give the example. My daughter wanted to work, and we found her a job, and we got the job coach in place, and they were helping her through all the things. And then we started to struggle socially at work, just like we struggle socially at school. So we had to explore, curriculum options to learn social skills in the workplace, and we had to really look at the environment in which she was working in, and is it supported enough from her? Does she need a work buddy, kind of like she needed a peer buddy at school? So you have to look into those things. If your student is going to need the support in the IEP, chances are they're going to need the support in a workplace as well. Next slide, please. Now, thinking about post-secondary education, like I mentioned before, we all learn when we leave high school. That doesn't stop because our entitlement services end. We can learn formally in a college type or trade school type setting. We can learn on the job, or we can learn through real life experiences. But like Megan said, let's not limit our students. There's plenty of opportunities out there to get support and learn in a post-secondary formal setting. My daughter currently is going to trade school with non-disabled peers, and we're getting her the support that she needs because we have systems in place and supports to do that. She's doing very well. She's going to culinary school. I'm getting fatter because she brings home her assignments every single day. It's wonderful. But we were able to connect her with those resources because of Think College. So Think College is an excellent resource to use. We talk about a lot here at Family Matters, especially in my role, but it's the national website. You get on it, you click on a state where you think your student wants to go to school at and where you feel like they could be supported at. So in my daughter's case, I didn't want her to go to school in California if I was still navigating doctor's appointments. I didn't want her to go to school in Maine if I was still making sure she needed a ride back and forth to work every day. So she found a school where she wanted to go. And then Think College helped connects us to the right kind of schools and what supports they had to offer and student services, and it was a great resource to have. So Think College is a resource there for all students with disabilities, including those with high support medical needs, intellectual disabilities. There's lots of great programs out there. So I highly encourage you to jump on Think College and see what options might be available for your student. Just don't think college won't be an opportunity because they don't read at grade level, they have an intellectual disability, the list goes on and on. So students need to understand lots of things about secondary education if it's a formal setting, all the way from admission requirements, how to disclose their disabilities, and who to connect with at the college to get support. Students should practice self-advocacy skills in the high school setting. So they need to know why they have an IEP. They need to know what they're eligible under. I laugh at this because so many schools I go into that my kids don't know the answers to these questions. And they need to know what those accommodations are in place for. And note, guys, these accommodations, they need to be written in student-friendly language, okay? If I put in an IEP that my student needs guided notes and my student doesn't know what the heck guided notes are they effective? Do they know why they need those? Do they know to ask for those in a college or workplace setting? No, they don't. But if I say my student needs someone to take notes for them and then they highlight things, guess what? Oh yeah, I use that and that helped me prepare for that test. I'm probably going to need that in a college setting too. So we have to make sure this is in language that they understand. College visits and oh, sorry.
We're having some slide issues, so it's just
okay.
going through. I'm trying to pull you back to where you're wanting to be. Sorry, keep going.
So I'm reading on the other one. I'm sorry, I'm reading on the other one. So no, not that one. There we go. That one. Is that where we are?
That's where we are.
That's where we are. Okay. Sorry, guys. Sorry. When I get started talking, I don't shut up. So that's the problem. So, okay. So college visits and program exploration should start early. I know typically juniors go to college visits and things like that, but maybe we're going to start a little bit early for our kiddo. If your kiddo wants to stay closer to home, let's look at the area colleges and what they have to offer. If your kiddo wants to stay close to home and you know there's a day program in your area that's going to be an option for you as they get older, let's go check this out a little bit earlier. Many inclusive programs have unique application processes and timelines, so be aware of that and reach out sooner rather than later. Next slide, but let me go back here and see what your next slide is to make sure I don't get off. Yep, that's the one I have too. Did I skip slides? It's a possibility.
You're fine. I didn't look that way because I started bouncing slides for some reason all of a sudden.
Okay. So my last slide, we're going to talk a little bit about independent living. Okay, so independent living is different for every single person. I am 42 years old and never left home, guys. Okay, I bought the house right next door to my parents, and that's where I have been for the last 23 years. Okay, not many people can say that, but that's how I live. That's how I'm happy. That's how I'm successful with the support I need. So everybody's independent living is going to look differently. Okay, you might choose for your student to live at home with you for a few years after high school or for long term. That's okay if that's what your student wants and that's what you want. Your student may plan to live in college for the first few years after high school or live in their community with support. All of these things are not wrong. Again, they are unique to your student and what they want for their future. The important thing is that we're addressing that in high school and we're building skills to get there. So for example, if my plan is for my student to live in a group home or in Illinois called a SILA, when they leave high school, when they leave entitlement services, by the way, entitlement services, we use that term as in they're entitled to an education until the age of 22 in Illinois if they fit the criteria. After that point, then they're eligible for services. So I use the term entitlement services. So they're entitled to those services. I want to make sure that we're building skills to get there. So if my plan is for my student to move into a group home after they leave high school, I need to start building skills so they can be as successful as possible in that group home setting. Okay, so we might want to work things on daily hygiene skills, toileting, washing their clothes. Like we want to focus on these things for independent living, but we don't want to forget the other two areas either. Okay, we want to make sure that we're still working on vocational goals, that we're still working on learning goals as we leave high school. So you have to have a good balance of all of these things. So here's some good examples, things we don't typically think about. Transportation and mobility. It's wonderful to have an employment goal. It's even better to get a job with supports, but if I can't get back and forth, it's not going to be successful. So we have to make sure that's integrated. Social relationships and skills. This is something that hit really, really hard for our daughter is when she left high school, she stopped seeing her friends. Like we didn't realize that, oh my gosh, we live out in the country, we're isolated. She only sees the people that she works with. You have to have a plan to continue those social relationships. You have to build that environment around your kiddo. Financial management, whether they're going to manage their own money, whether you're going to help them manage their money, whether a third party is going to manage their money for them. They need to understand financial management. Daily living skills like hygiene, laundry, cleaning, Healthcare management is also a good one. There's some really good tools from the Charting the Life course Nexus on understanding healthcare management, no matter the complexity of your student. They can understand, who this doctor is, why I see them, what medication they prescribe, how I contact them. And of course, self-advocacy rights. They need to understand that if they feel inside their self that something is wrong, they can advocate for change. We all have that right in America to this morning. It's still current. So it's really important that we encourage that in our students. This means that they have the right to change, they have the right to vote, they have the right to do as everyone else does. So we want to make sure that they understand that, and we have these embedded into their independent living goal with their transition plan. All right, so next slide, and I think it's Megan's.
Thank you. And before we go too far, I want to tell you, as I'm watching the chat and I'm seeing some questions come up, for example, about can I access DRS support services if I'm on the Medicaid home and community-based waiver? And how do I find out about housing and group homes as a reference? And so I want to let you know that Annie and Jaron are going to dig into that, because those are we're kind of throwing the terms around that we're getting from families, but those are very specific terms that are tied to very specific services and funding streams. And we want to make sure that you leave this series completely understanding that. So I would encourage you for sure to be at Annie and Jaron's 2 presentations, because they're going to tap into both of those in depth, and you will have a much better understanding of how that system works and where you need to be connected and sort of the decision-making points along that journey. So just so you know, that will be covered. So don't worry that you won't gather all of that information that you need. So support networks and social connections. This is actually part of the reason we became so interested in Charting the Life course, because we see over and over and over again that the support networks that individuals, students with disabilities have often completely crumbles when they leave the school setting. And that assumes that they had a strong support network in the school setting, which is hit and miss. So some questions you're really going to want to ask at those transition IEPs, I can't encourage you enough to tell you how critical this is for long-term success, is who is currently in my child's support network. Map it out. Sit down and map out who's in that support network, and who will likely be there after high school. And really think through who's going to be present, who's going to be engaged, who's going to be really involved with my student, and who's likely to sort of fall off. And some just naturally fall off because your relationships are based on the connections you have within the school system. You're no longer in the school system. So if you see, 90% of the support system falls off, your job at that point is we've got to rebuild a support network that's going to stand the test of time. Second, how are we doing that? How are we making those connections? Those connections can be made all different ways. I was thinking last night as I was sitting around a group of women a similar age to me, and I was mentioning we were looking for this, and the other women would, of course, immediately say, "Oh, have you tried here? Have you looked here? Oh, you should call so and so. I heard they had a good experience here." It was this networking process that all of us go through. We need to know and make sure that students with disabilities have the social capital they need to get the support that they need and to do the things that they want to do in the community. And a lot of that is built on networks. So thinking about when you go to the library, how are you connecting with the folks that work there? When you're doing job shadowing, how are you connecting and learning about those folks? How are you inviting people into your life? That's a really important piece of success long-term. When we talk about that age 40 midlife success, support networks are where that's at. Are we fostering natural supports instead of just paid supports? Paid supports are wonderful. They're critical, right? For a lot of our folks, especially our folks who have high support needs or have a minimal for family support. So paid supports are critical. But what are the support networks that look like when we don't have paid supports? Because paid supports aren't always manageable. We're not always eligible for paid supports. And even when we are, sometimes it's difficult to find them. So thinking about neighbors, church. With Abby, I always think about scouting because she's so deeply involved in scouting and that support network. Volunteer opportunities. What kind of networking opportunities are you building? And I'll be honest, this is not something that will fall into your lap. This is not something that just happens in the transition process. This is door knocking, conversation, connections that have to happen for you to build that network. So really be honest about what that network looks like for a particular student, and then be really intentional about how you're going to build that. And that can be really helpful. I can give you an example of my daughter. She doesn't have a strong social network. And when she left school, she particularly didn't have a strong social network, but we had to tap into the things that were of interest to her. So something that's deeply of interest to her is Broadway and singing and Disney. And so we still struggled, but over time, we were able to get her involved in some theater work that really connected to like things that were of interest to her and people that related to her interest and wanted to support her in her interest. And all of a sudden, her social network started to take shape. And so, really thinking about the social network is built on interest. It's not just built on goodwill. It's built on connection and interest, the same way that my social network is built on connection and interest. So thinking about that. And then how will social capital impact employment and independent living options? Really think about that at 40. How do you get jobs? How do you get jobs? How do I get jobs? We know each other. We connect to each other. We offer opportunity based on those connections. It's no different for folks with disabilities. We somehow treat it differently because we might have some eligibility-based services that are supporting those processes. But ultimately, it often comes down to relationships and community connections that build those supports. We just tend to ignore that in supporting folks with disabilities. We tend to go all in on eligibility-based services and expect those services to manage all of those needs. And they simply aren't built to do that. And I'll be completely honest, they will not do that. It's not, we don't see success long-term. We definitely see success, in, for example, job supports, but does that carry over? No, that relies on naturally built social networks and social capital. So it's really an intentional planning process, and it's not something that we build in all the time.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, Megan, because I have to share like a recent success story with just this. So I had a high school student that I did a person-centered plan using the Charting the Life course framework with, and we used that community mapping tool, which is a great tool. I'm just not I've not used it as much as the other tools. So I was nervous going into this. So I'm building the relationship with this student, and he's struggling in lots of different areas, but definitely in the social aspect. And I said, well, what are you interested in? And he's like, I like video games. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. I'm like, I like video games too. This is like what I like to play. And he tells me those games are for old people, and, we're laughing. And I find out that his school has a gaming club. And I said, have you thought about going to gaming club? And he said, well, there's nobody like me in gaming club, meaning that there's nobody with a disability in gaming club, right? And we talk more about it. And guess what? He starts gaming club. And gaming club led into being part of this Dungeons and Dragons universe within his small town that's really geeky and awesome. And he's so great and he loves it. And he goes every week. Now that he's not a high school student anymore, he goes every week to this group setting of adults that do this very fun game that he loves. And that led into an employment opportunity for my kiddo too. Okay, so he made a social connection through a support we put in place in high school. He moved into an adult social connection, and then that moved into an employment connection. So, and this is for a student that has significant support needs, guys. So it's available to everybody. We can't put people with disabilities in a box and think they can only take advantage of services of organizations and things that are in place that have the supports there already. Because we all know as parents in the special needs world, we have to spearhead. I would not be involved in scouting if I thought scouting was a safe place for my kid to go to with no supports. Like, I jumped in there, I made it inclusive, we pushed for it, and my son's an Eagle Scout now. Because he's an Eagle Scout, he got a college scholarship. Like, those things roll. We have to do the same thing when they're adults. We have to push in a little bit and say, Annie really likes Broadway, and I know Broadway, this theater club might be hard for her, but we're going to do that. And we're going to offer these supports. And now Annie has a whole network of people that are not her parents, that are not her family. So sorry to interrupt you. Recent success story I heard about recently. So
that's a good one. And I think it brings to mind the one thing that you have to think about, whether you're a professional who's sort of building systems for folks with disabilities, or you're a parent, or your self-advocate, is it is reasonable to have high expectations of those community resources and to expect them to be inclusive and to push them to be inclusive. So it's totally a reasonable thing. The fact that nobody with a disability was in the gaming club does not mean that that's okay and that we don't have work to do and that we can't hold a level of accountability around inclusion for all of those activities. And that starts in high school. You really have to push for inclusive social opportunities in high school. And because we focus a lot on academic goals, which is critical, sometimes we forget that in high school, half of having a full experience happens after 3 p.m. And so you really need to think about, what does my transition plan look like after 3 p.m. Because that's really important. And I think we can all, when we look back on high school, when I look back on high school, I'm not thinking about that geometry class, right? I'm thinking about going to the basketball game at night and my friends and what that looked like. And if our students with complex support needs aren't there, we have failed. And so really looking at that process will build you into a stronger transition process. So I know we're talking kind of slow. Abby, we're at 12:50, just to tell you. So you're going to hit 18. Abby mentioned that at 18, educational decision-making rights transfer to the student. Your school needs to tell you that a year ahead of time. I think they do a great job at prepping you for that. But do know that that's going to happen. And if you have questions about what that looks like or what it means, your student can delegate those rights directly to you. You also need to consider things like supportive decision-making, guardianship options. Do you need those? Do you not need those? What does that student particularly need? That's not necessarily something we're diving into today, but it's important to talk about. Okay, Abby, go ahead as fast as you can.
Fast as I can. Common barriers to effective transition planning. Fast as I can. There's lots of barriers, guys. There's lots of them. There's one key barrier is low expectations. So we got to have high expectations of our students, just like we do to other ones. Limited work-based learning experiences, like I mentioned before. Inadequate coordination between school and adult service agencies. This is because of a number of problems. But it's important to know that we can't take no for an answer. We have to keep asking questions and we have to keep inviting. Families often feel overwhelmed, and uncertain about the transition process. Definitely reach out to other people that can help you navigate this. And insufficient self-advocacy and self-determination. So like I stated before, our students don't know why they have an IEP, they don't know why it's in place, and they don't know why they should be working toward anything. Next slide, please. What is person-centered planning? Well, person-centered planning is very natural. Your student's been doing it at least since the first day they got an IEP. It's about making a plan for our student that's about our student. And here at Family Matters, we really embrace the Charting the Life course principles and framework, and we use the tools that I provided in the chat just a minute ago to get to the best goals possible for our students. So again, student-centered planning is about the student. So we think about what the student wants for the rest of their life, just not until they're done with entitlement, just not until they're 25. We think about forever. I used the example before that D would live in a group home close to his family home with supports of his family and friends. That's a big reason, not just because I wanted him to be close to home, but because if I'm helping to navigate shopping at Walmart, I can't do that if he's 4 hours away, right? And I definitely can't do that after my time on this earth is done. Okay, he needs to be in an environment where he can make friends, make connections with families to continue to support him as an adult for long term. So student-centered planning needs to focus around the student and what the student wants, not just what we're used to doing, not what we think we have the funds to do. We need to really consider what the student wants and let them learn if that's what they want through natural consequence. Right? If they want to be a doctor, let's give them opportunities to be a doctor and help them understand maybe that's not for them. We definitely are not going to look at them and say, no, you're not capable of. Next slide, please. I'm leaving out such good stuff, Megan. It's hard. Okay.
No.
When we think about person-centered, we want to listen deeply and look between the lines. So understand your student's dream. For example, why does my student want to be a doctor? Okay, what is the reasoning behind that? Invite the right people there to share in their dream. So we don't want to hear a lot of negativity. We want to hear, maybe invite a doctor to talk to your student someday and talk about all the schooling they had or what they got to clean up poopy sometimes, explain all these things to our student. Identify the strengths that the students have and the assets that they're already using and build upon that and create action steps, right? So we're going to actively move towards the goals that the student wants to have. So develop those concrete, achievable actions and move forward. Next slide, and I think it's you, Megan. Good luck talking fast.
I know I'm feeling the pressure. So as Abby mentioned, the key to this process is listening deeply and giving your student a voice. And that does not necessarily mean that your student's sitting at the IEP table sharing verbally what they need. It can mean they're using their AC device. It can mean they're texting their goals and it's being relayed to through mom or guardian or whoever is at the table if that's not comfortable to the student. It can mean they're working with their transition facilitator at their high school to build a presentation they want to give, but they don't want to talk, but maybe they're going to use pictures on their iPad. It's really critical that you empower every student, regardless of how they communicate their needs, so that they can share their ideas. So you might have a student who is only being offered two things. They can clean up in the cafeteria, or maybe they can dust the shelves in the library. I've seen this very, very frequently. And the only way they're going to get any other opportunities is for them to earn their way out of those options that are on the table. And that is not person-centered in any way. And so maybe we're going to figure out for that student who has very high support needs, how we're going to give them an opportunity to be exposed to other options, and that they're going to have an opportunity to choose among other options that better align with their interests. So thinking about those things, invite the right people to the table. As Abby said, maybe you're going to invite a doctor. Maybe you're going to invite somebody from the shop up the street who, because your student really wants to work at a gift shop. Think about who you can bring to the table, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you don't know who to ask. Thinking about bringing people in that wouldn't traditionally be at the table. That's how you get to student-centered outcomes, and then create action steps. So a student and a family should be able to look at a transition plan after they fully participated in it and very clearly delineate what the next step is and what they're going to do and what next week's going to look like and what they're going to do with this particular experience. And if they can't, it's probably not a strong enough transition plan for them to fully engage in it. So that should look like, oops, I went too far. This is touchy today. Like me.
You've done it now. You went
Now
all
it
the
just
way.
wants to keep going. Let's get back. You can see we're probably not going to get through all this. We're gonna,
We are.
a strong
We got this.
transition plan. It's a clear vision statement about what that's going to look like. All the assessments are strength-based. They're coordinated. I always say if you are sitting around an IEP table and there's 3 people sitting at the table and they cannot tell you who they are, what they're going to add to that plan, or what their role in supporting the student is, you've got the wrong people at the table. So if you're at the table, you need to be able to contribute feedback and guidance specific to that student that day. And so that's a good way to look at. That's sometimes what we see with outside agencies being involved. We absolutely want their voice at the table in transition. We want to hear their options. We want to talk through barriers, but we need to give them the opportunity to share those, and we need to expect that they're going to share that. So coordinated resources, student-driven goals that are measurable, SMART goals, as Abby mentioned earlier, bringing in natural community connections that we might not traditionally have at the IEP table, and then regular review and adjustment. And I would say you need to be looking at that IEP every 8 weeks. You don't need to have a full meeting, but you need to be looking at that and seeing, are we making progress? What's not working? What barriers are we hitting? Do we need to change course on something? And we don't always do that. We write it and we move on, and maybe we look at it every 6 months as a family. And that often comes down to families making those assessments, looking at that. Abby, we've talked a lot about building self-determination, so I'm going to skip through that so we can go. Okay, go ahead.
Well, now I don't know where we are. Gosh.
Where are we? Can you see?
No. I'm good. I'm just joking.
Okay.
Your role as a family partner. So be there, be present as much as possible, and not just at the IEP meeting table. Okay. If you are dishing out family chores on Saturday morning and you notice that your daughter really enjoys the task of laundry. Okay. I don't know why she would, but maybe she really enjoys the task of laundry, right? How do I know she's enjoying it? Well, she's not protesting to doing it. She does it effectively. She does it without being asked. Like, these are things you're noticing. Share this with your team. Okay. This could lead to some type of job opportunity. This could lead to some type of volunteer opportunity to learn more. If you go to church and your church helps do peace meals on Saturdays, again, share this information with your team so we can go in that direction to explore these opportunities. Connect with other families too and talk about what's been successful for them. Learn about your rights through IDEA and Illinois School Code. Explore community resources. And again, don't just think about resources that fit people with disabilities. Your child has the right to attend and fit into any other type of organization or anything they want to do. And ask about adult service options in your area. Celebrate the progress and stay strong and stay hopeful. Communicate with your team often, not just about the negative, but reach out and say, you know, Sheila really liked that you guys went to the dog pound the other day. She wants to volunteer there now. Share those things. Next slide, please. So some key resources, of course, the Illinois State Board of Education, they actually have a whole part of their website dedicated to transition. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, charting the life course nexus, which you're going to hear us talk about a whole lot. So charting the life course has a website, and all those tools are free to use, guys. Free with lots of wonderful videos. I don't work for the Nexus team, I promise. I'm just really passionate about it. And like Megan and I stated before, we are charting the life course ambassadors. That is a ambassadorship program you do have to pay to take, but all the resources are free. Pacer Center also has amazing transitional supports. Think College, like we talked about before, and the Center for Parent and Information and Resources, otherwise known as CIPR. Next slide, please. Your action steps. Request a transition-focused IEP meeting. I don't care if you had an IEP 3 weeks ago. If you came here and you watched this and you said, I don't feel like my transition plan is good enough for my kid, call a meeting. Call us and we'll look through it and we'll review it and we'll talk about ways it can be more student-centered. Review that current IEP, like I just said. Connect with adult service agencies like your PASS agency, your DRS services. Engage your student in the process. So make sure you're observing them and looking at what they like, what they want to do, talking with them about it, and build your support network. Make sure you're connecting with all the things like Family Matters to connect you with all the right spots, like the Arc of Illinois, all the things, guys. Next slide, please. Are we good?
We're not going to read through these because we're running out of time, but these are things you want to bring to your next transition meeting so that you can have the questions available to you that you can ask. These will start driving decisions you're making about transition. And these sometimes will just come up naturally in a transition meeting, but a lot of times they won't. So print these out and bring them to your next meeting, and that will help the conversation be more robust. And these are just our legal disclaimers that we have to share. So we are not a legal services agency, and we like you to know we don't provide any legal advice to family owners. And I want to follow up on something Abby said that I think is really important. You're on this call, I can see that there's a ton of professionals who work in DD who are going to be full of resources, who are going to know so much about this. So I absolutely think it's critical that you connect to community resources in that way. But if I can give you one bit of guidance that I've seen over the years, over and over and over again, the most important thing as a parent or guardian in terms of planning and having long-term success is being connected to other parents and guardians. The parent-to-parent network in the developmental disability community is incredibly powerful and knowledgeable, and you're going to get more information parent to parent than you're going to get from us, from anybody else. So please make sure you're building that parent-to-parent network. With that, I'm going to stop the share. We are going to share the slides, the recording, and follow up very quick. I promise, like 30-second survey. We're a federally funded program. It's really important that we get your feedback, and we absolutely take it to heart and make programming decisions based on it. So you'll get that in your email. And if you have any questions, let us know. Sandy's asking, do we have any information on parent-to-parent support networks? Sandy, we're aware of the larger parent-to-parent support networks in Illinois. iPad United, CU Able, we can give you some information on those. But there's a lot of very small ones in communities across the state. Abby, they want your email.
I know, I'm scared. No, I'm just joking. I'm excited. I'm excited for sure. Yes. We do have a couple questions. Do we have time to take questions? Do you guys okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. At this time, then we're going to stop the recording so we can share it in a public format like YouTube and all the other things. So if you're just watching the recording of this or you stayed with us today, thank you so much. And I encourage you to please reach out and take our survey so that we can get all the great data. So I will stop the recording at this time. Annie and Jaron and Megan, just wave.